Hello, Joan. Hello, Margaret.
Hello, Carrie.
Hello, Carrie.
Are we expecting a good attendance today?
We're thinking so.
Good,
I hope so.
good.
And if we don't have enough, committee members, we'll have enough consultants here to make it feel like a party.
Okay, well, some of us will just have to talk a lot to fill the empty space.
Hello, Thomas. Hello, Julie. There's Alexandra.
I'm looking at my, the list on the website isn't updated with members, so I'm looking at the last minutes. So we, right now, just have Margaret, myself, and Thomas, unless I'm missing. Who else is
Julie.
a member?
Julie
Waterstone.
Yeah, is a new member.
Okay, oh, good, okay. Hello.
Hello.
Okay, great. So now we got one more. And what do we need for a
Five.
quorum?
5.
So right now I see Judith is not here. Alexis, is she here?
Not yet.
Okay, and Ralph? Don't see Ralph. Oh, Amy's here. Okay, good. So I think we have a quorum now.
And who came in on the iPhone?
Hi, Gary, it's Esme.
Oh, okay. Hi, Esme.
Hello.
So now we have a quorum, correct?
You do.
Okay, great. I would like to call the meeting to order. Okay. That's a hard thing. Regarding the agenda, I think we've already accepted the minutes of September 1st, so we do not need to do that. Is that correct?
I
That's
don't,
correct. Mhm.
we did. I thought we left it off the October meeting.
Well, the October meeting minutes, which I was good and reviewed, do not reflect that.
They say that it was approved?
Yes.
Okay,
Yeah.
cool. Thank you.
Okay, so I think we're only looking at the September minutes. I would like to mention, like I just did, that the website doesn't have the updated members in it and also doesn't reflect that September 1st meeting.
Mhm.
And we've had members of the public comment that we haven't met for like a year. So we want to make sure all our meetings are on there.
We'll get that updated.
Okay. So we could move any comment, I guess move to approve the October 18th minutes.
Oh, I have a couple comments.
Well, we just have to get that on the table. So just, you want to second that, Margaret? And then we'll have discussion.
Sure.
Okay, now, anyone have any comments on the minutes?
First of all, I want to thank whoever took the minutes, that they're much more robust and nearly complete. I think it's just terrific. We have a good record of what we discussed. I'd like to add a few items that were not mentioned under item B, the project updates. I think there were actually 4 projects that were updated. One was Lincoln.
Maybe I'll look at
2 was Smash, Muir, 3 was Grant, and then 4 was Rogers. So there was discussion of four campuses, and I would like that reflected in the minutes.
Sounds good. Anything else?
And I could just review what those were. If there are any questions, I have notes. So if whoever's doing the correction would like to contact me, but or you can listen to the tape if there's a tape.
There is.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, I would
Did
just,
we tape it? That was an in-person meeting. Did we actually record that?
It
Yeah.
was an in-person meeting. I don't know.
Oh, no, we didn't tape it because it was in person.
Oh, okay. Well, then let me just say briefly what the items were on Lincoln. It was discussed that it was planned as a 2-year project and will finish in summer on time. Shops building at 14th and Washington. The question was renovate or replace. Smash Muir, interior modernization completed in summer, to come exterior painting, theater and library in spring. And Grant, all permits received, all systems being activated. And maintenance painting, there was a discussion about painting. Maintenance painting typically doesn't come to the FDAC. So those are just my notes, if that's helpful.
Good job. All right. Anyone else have any other comments regarding the minutes?
I'll just add my typical request that the minutes be provided like 2 weeks after the meeting as opposed to months afterwards at the next meeting. It's very, I mean, thankfully Margaret did a great job of taking, her own notes so that we could have it, but it's too long. I mean, I think in the professional world, you would typically get the minutes within a week. So I'm making it 2 weeks because I know that there's a lot of input from other parties before minutes are issued.
Okay, so noted. So do we need to, I forgot, do we need to remove to accept the minutes with Margaret's changes? Or can we just vote to accept the minutes with Margaret's changes?
You can probably change your motion to, you could amend your motion to include Margaret's additions.
Okay.
You were the mover.
And I second the amended motion.
Okay, perfect.
Great.
All those in favor of accepting the amended October 18th minutes, 2021?
Aye.
Okay, think we're good. All those opposed? Any abstentions? Judith abstained. Okay.
I wasn't.
Right, perfect.
And then just in case, I don't know if Margaret can second her own amendment. So if necessary, just to make it correct.
But she's not. She's seconding the original motion and then allowing the amended motion, not her changes. It's Joan's motion.
Okay. All right. So I already pretty much said that what I wanted to say about the website, so I do not have any further reports. Steve?
No, I think I'm not going to add anything today because we've got a lot ahead of us with the historic resources reports and then the SMS projects.
Oh, I do want to add that I believe we have, I'm sorry, Steve, I didn't read your recent text. We have two
We'll
two
do
public
those.
speakers.
Yeah,
that
we'll
would
do those when we get to the items.
Yeah, so just for the committee to know, what we do is we typically will have the presentation for the staff. And when we have comments, then we will have a question. The members can ask questions or clarifying comments or that kind of thing, but not have discussion. And then we'll have the public comments. And then after that, we'll have discussion. Is that correct, Steve?
Yep, perfect.
Okay. That's on the 2 items 6 and 7, which are next. Okay.
And I just want to mention that we have Peter James here, who is our representative on this committee from the city.
Hi, everybody. Sorry, I'm a little bit late.
Okay,
No problem.
we've had Peter as part of this meeting before. So, Peter, what's your job at the city? And I know it changed. So,
It's the same as yours, Chief Operating Officer.
okay. So,
Oh, wow. Okay.
Okay, go for it.
Okay, thank you, Joan. So we're gonna now get into this is discussion item. There's no vote on the draft historic resources reports. Y'all should have received that. I'm gonna turn this over to Kerry and he'll share time with Julian to walk us through those. And we've got our historic resources consultants on the call as well.
yes. So I'm going to go ahead and share this presentation. And hold on a moment as I figure this out. And okay, are you seeing the presentation? Or are you seeing the one with the next slide?
We're seeing a big slide and a little slide.
Yeah, it's showing
Okay.
the next slide still, Kerry.
Okay, hang on a second. I forget how I do that. Is that better?
Sure
Did
is.
did that fix it?
You did it.
Okay, great. And if most people could mute unless you're speaking, I think it'll help with sort of some of the noise. And thank you. So, all right. So we sent you and Architectural Resources Group and Historic Resources Group. I'm hearing a little squeak. Is that just me, or is that everybody? Okay.
It's not just you. Can you set me as a co-host?
Yes. Maybe. Okay, Steve, you're a ghost. Huh. So, Architectural Resources Group and Historic Resources Group have completed their analysis for the historic resources reports, and we sent those to you. I hope you had some good reading. They're rather lengthy, but hopefully you enjoyed or at least went through them. And then I'm going to go through this, but I'm going to pass it over to them in just a moment to let them really talk about the individual sites. So as a big summary, this is big picture summary, they determined that the only building that is a potential historic resources would be the Franklin Building B, the 2-story building as you approach it. But they have identified historic districts potentially at many of the other sites that could be listed under the California Register and the local Santa Monica Register. Historic districts, and I just went ahead and printed this from the, I believe it's from one of the 2 reports. It's definitely from one of the 2 reports. I think it's ARG's report. That's when they encompass multiple buildings, site features with common characteristics, and significant concentration linkage continuity of site buildings together to sort of convey a visual sense of the overall historic environment. Like y'all read through that for a second. And comprises features that might lack individual distinction, but collectively they create a whole and a context. Often schools that are developed over a period of time might be that, but might not be that, depending on sort of how they are developed and how they grow up. And so that was one of the main challenges of looking at our sites in terms of a historic district. Now I have to say this, and I'm going to say this out loud, and then I have my historians who are going to respond to this, is that K-12 schools are typically not evaluated as historic districts. LAUSD really is the only school that we found, district so far that we found that actually is designating historic districts in a K-12 setting so far in California, but we're doing additional research into that. Mckinley, Alexandra, I think you're taking it for Historic Resources Group. Would you like to walk us through and just say next when you want me to change slides?
Absolutely. So just as brief introduction, I'm Alexandra, I'm with HRG. So I'll go ahead and start with Mckinley. So you know what, I'm actually going to, sorry, excuse me 1 minute. I have a different slide up. So I just need to, okay, there we go. So next slide, please. So McKinley Elementary School was found eligible under 2 different criteria. Criteria A at the national level, 1 at the state level, and 1 at the local level, as well as C at the national level, 3 at the state level, and then 4 and 5 at the local level, with a period of significance from 1923 to 1937. This time frame includes the original period of development on the campus in the 1920s by noted architects Allison and Allison. It was designed in the Italian Renaissance style, and it was later rehabilitated in the 1930s by Parkinson and Parkinson. This rehabilitation took place following the 1933 Long Beach earthquake, when schools were often rehabilitated for modern seismic stability. As such, it's a rare example of a pre-1933 school, and the post-earthquake rehabilitation was also funded by the WPA, which was a federal program created to alleviate mass unemployment during the Great Depression. So contributing features are those buildings and features that were constructed during the period of significance. So next slide. Oh, is there a slide missing?
I put this slide in to sort of talk about what you've identified.
Oh, okay. Is the aerial photograph in there? Yeah.
There.
Oh, okay. Gotcha. So we can do it the other way then, if that works better. And
Okay.
yeah. Sorry. So
That's all right.
essentially, the potential historic district consists of 2 contributing buildings, 2 site features, and 2 additional features. And again, the period of significance for this site is 1923 to 1937. So these are photographs of the contributing buildings and features. They include Building B and Building C, which date to the 1920s and were rehabilitated in the 30s. The main central courtyard between those buildings, Santa Monica Boulevard Quad, which is along that public right-of-way, as well as WP era plaque, and then also storybook sculpture, which is located in the main courtyard. Next.
This sort of says what you said, but
Yes, and so essentially we found them eligible at the state and the local level, ultimately because of alterations. So just a little bit more detail, Building C built in 1923, expanded in 29 to 30, rehabilitated in 35 to 37. So that was following the Long Beach earthquake. And then there were modernization and updating to the building in the 1970s and 1990s. So next. And this shows a really helpful aerial of what we found to be eligible and contributing to the historic district. So you see Building B and C there, the main courtyard in which the storybook sculpture is centrally located, and then also the Santa Monica Boulevard Quad along Santa Monica Boulevard, and the WPA bronze plaque.
Franklin. So Andrew from ARG will be talking about Franklin.
Good evening, everybody. I'm Andrew.
Sorry,
Oh.
Carrie, can I ask a question?
Yes.
So when we're saying this is a potential historic district, what does that mean to us as a committee? Like, how are we supposed to interpret these findings?
Sure. I'm going to have an answer, and then I'm going to invite Alexandra and Andrew to also have an answer to this question. It means that in their analysis, these features, either through the federal, the state, or the local level, they have a potential to join those registries. So they are potential historic resources that we want to consider as we move forward in our projects as to what we're going to do. It does not mean that we will be applying directly for registration. It does mean that we are assessing them. As part of that assessment, which we'll be doing as part of our CEQA work, which ARG and HRG will be assisting us with that. They will also work with us as we look at other development around them, any alteration or adaptive reuse of those facilities, and even to an extent that if we make a decision to significantly alter or remove them, that is something we would deal with through the CEQA process. So we have, so what it tells us, so the reports, I'm going to simplify it and say, the reports tell us, hey, this is something special that we should be a little more careful with and we should take care of, and that our consideration of it is going to have to be somewhat different than, say, the like little preschool building here that was built much later and isn't that special.
Okay.
Alexandra or Andrew, would you like to add to what I just said? Or clarify what I just said?
I think you explained it very well, Carrie. I think that at this point, it's really a matter of providing you all with information as to what some of the areas of opportunity and constraint may be with respect to historic resources specifically on these campuses.
Thank you.
Sure. So my name is Andrew Goodrich. I'm with ARG. And we evaluated 3 campuses, one of which is Franklin. So we're going to begin with that. Next slide, please. So I just wanted to begin by providing a very, very quick rundown of the approach that we took for each campus, Franklin, and then the other 2 that we also looked at. We started just by reviewing existing documentation and participating in a series of public meetings. This is to collect information and identify sources of information. From there, we conducted extensive background research into the history of the campus and the district and developed historic context. We did a field inspection of each campus where we walked the grounds. We took a careful look at all the buildings and site features and other improvements that are there. And then we compiled everything into the draft historic resources reports that are being discussed today. Next slide, please. So talking a little bit more about Franklin specifically, just a little bit of history about this campus. It was originally built in 1924. You can see that in that upper photo there. However, it was extensively damaged in 1933 during the Long Beach earthquake. The campus was reconstructed in 1937 by noted architects Marsh, Smith, and Powell, who did a number of these Depression era reconstruction projects across the district. And then subsequent additions were made to the Franklin campus in 1948 and again in 1952. This is a period of tremendous growth for Santa Monica. And in more recent years, a number of modular and portable buildings have been added to accommodate additional growth. Next slide, please. So we took a careful look at everything on this campus. In our opinion, there is not a historic district present at this campus as there was at Mckinley and at others. And our reasoning was that the buildings, kind of when you look at them all together, they date to various periods. They're designed in various styles by various architects. They are not directly associated with a very deliberate master plan. And kind of collectively, they aren't really kind of meaningfully connected in any sort of way that would typically merit recognition as a historic district. That said, one building was identified as an individually eligible historic resource. This is building B, which is pictured here. This is the main building as you're approaching the school from the north off of Montana Avenue. It was found to be eligible for listing in the California Register, so state listing, and then also a local listing under criteria, two sets of criteria. So the first set is Criterion 1, which really has to do with patterns of development and specifically institutional history related to the reconstruction of schools and the involvement of federal assistance programs in the 1930s and 40s. And then the second criterion is Criterion 3, and this has to do with architecture. The building was found to be a significant example of a PWA modern style building. It was also designed by a noted architectural firm, Marsh, Smith and Powell. In addition to the building, the lawn in the front of the building, so it's to the immediate north of the building as you're approaching Building B from Montana Avenue, was identified as a related feature of the historical resource. It really creates a very kind of formal and logical entry sequence between the public right-of-way and the school, which was an important component of these 1930s era designs. And next slide, please. So it's maybe a little easier to see this in graphic form. So up here is a site plan of the campus. That kind of blue hatched area right there is the footprint of Building B. And then the red hatched area kind of beyond that, that's the boundary of that landscape that's associated with the campus. And that summarizes our findings for Franklin.
I just add, there's a little bit of an appendage here, right here, that this was we think this was added. This 1-story section right here came a little later, so.
That's correct. And we're verifying that through additional research.
Yep. Will Rogers. Alexandra.
Hi again. Okay, so moving on to Will Rogers. At Will Rogers, HRG has identified a potential historic district. And this is a fun image of it from a newspaper clipping. Next. So Will Rogers was found eligible under criteria A1 and 1, federal, state, and local, as well as criteria C3, 4, and 5, with a period of significance from 1948 to 1950. So this was built in the post-war era. And the time frame includes the original period of development in the post-war years as the population of Sunset Park grew. So Sunset Park was the neighborhood in which Will Rogers is located. The school was founded or funded by a 1946 bond and was assisted by the WPA. It's also eligible for its international style of architecture and the cluster plan, which was developed by notable architect Henry L. Gogarty. The later 1950s buildings, which some like to refer to as the fingernails on the fingers, were built in the 1950s, and they adhere to the original school plan and design vocabulary. So contributing features are those buildings and features that date to that period of significance and retain their integrity. So next. So the potential historic district consists of 13 buildings, 3 site features, and 1 additional feature from 1948 to 1950. Next. So the buildings are as listed, A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, J, K, L, M, N, and P. The site features are the courtyards, and just as a note, it is the spatial relationships rather than landscaping of these courtyards that were found eligible and to be significant. The 14th Street quad and the stone planters. Additional features include the original Will Rogers Elementary School sign, which dates to circa 1948. So here is an aerial just to show the plan and the layout and how these buildings really are related to each other, as well as the location of those courtyards, mostly which are paved. The 14th Street quad, which served as the original historic entrance. The Will Rogers Elementary School sign, which is currently sort of like tucked behind some newer entry pavilion, stone planters, and the courtyard. So those are the main features. And then here are some photographs of the different buildings from various angles. So you can see the courtyards in some of these photographs as well, sort of linking the different school wings. Next. A few more photographs. And next. And that's about it. So the 14th Street quad is that main quad, the Will Rogers sign, and then the stone planters, both of which are original.
Grant.
Hello again. So the second campus that ARG looked at was Grant Elementary School. Next slide, please. So the original Grant campus was actually located several blocks to the north of the existing campus at 22nd Street and Virginia Avenue. This original campus is no longer there. It too was extensively damaged in the Long Beach earthquake of 1933. At the time, the district was also struggling with managing capacity at this campus. So it was decided to, instead of reconstruct the existing campus, to build an entirely new one from the ground up. So this was the impetus for the present day Grant campus on Pearl Street. This campus was built in a number of phases. The original phase dates to 1936. It consists of buildings designed by the architectural firm of Parkinson and Parkinson. And then additional phases were completed in subsequent years in 1940 and 1945 by Joe Estep, another architect. And it's worth mentioning that Donald Parkinson and Joe Estep did work in collaboration with each other often, and they designed some significant structures, including Santa Monica City Hall. Just a little bit of context there. More buildings were added to the campus in subsequent years after World War II and beyond, but these later buildings, they really deviated from existing conditions on the site with respect to their placement, their architectural styling, their massing, etc. Next slide, please. So on this campus, we did identify a potential historic district. The district does not include everything on the campus, but it really focuses on the what we call the historic core of the campus. So this includes the original buildings dating to 1936, as well as those buildings that were added to the campus in the 1940s by Joe Estep. In total, there are 7 contributing buildings within this district. So these are buildings B, C, D, E, G, H, and K. In addition, there is a historic courtyard that is bounded by buildings B, C, D, and G. Sorry, that's a lot of letters there. But the courtyard was also found to contribute to the district and is located within the boundaries of that district. Other buildings that were constructed later are not a part of the district. So these include buildings A, which dates to the 50s, building F, which dates to the 1960s, and then the northernmost portion of building B, which also dates to the 1950s. And it's a little easier to see that in plans, so I'll show that to you in a minute. The period of significance of this district begins in 1936 and ends in 1945. This corresponds with the period during which the campus witnessed its original phases of development, and represents the work of Parkinson and Joe Estep. And really, this is a case where the significance of these buildings and these site features has everything to do with their relationship with one another. When evaluated separate and a part of the district, none of the buildings or site features were found to be individually eligible. They were district contributors only. Next slide, please. So this graphic here just shows the boundaries of the district, which is outlined in that hatched red. The yellow are building footprints. So it's a little hard to see, but you can see that the historic district really encompasses the original kind of grouping of buildings and site features that constitute that campus. Right there where the mouse is that courtyard that I referenced. And then building B is that building right there that's kind of split down the middle. So the portion within the red hatch is a contributor to the district. The portion outside is a later addition. It reads as a later addition and it is not a contributor to the district. And that is all for grants.
The other thing I just want to mention is the library, which is F, was a later addition, but this building, which is adjacent to the library, was an original addition.
That's correct.
Roosevelt.
Okay. Hello again. So HRG also identified a potential historic district at Roosevelt that's eligible for listing in the California Register and for designation at the local level. Next. So Roosevelt Elementary School's potential historic district was found eligible under criteria A11 and C3, 4, and 5. And this timeframe includes the original period of development in the post-1933 Long Beach earthquake years. It was designed by master architects Marsh, Smith, and Powell, and it was actually the first example of their innovative Santa Monica plan, which was really a new way of approaching construction that focused on one-story wood buildings that specifically had a lot of access to the outdoors and were very child size centered. Development was also funded by the WPA for this school. So next. So the buildings that were found to be contributors include the ones shown on the map. There are 6 contributing buildings, 5 site features, and 2 additional features. So contributing buildings include C, B, E, G, J, and K. Just to mention that K also had an addition, which is not included. That's a later addition and was not, and the boundary does not include that section of the building. Additionally, contributing features include the North Quad and the South Quad. It's not so much the landscaping for these features, although there are aspects of the quads, including the original patios that were used for that outdoor-indoor sort of child development that were originally part of Marsh and Smith's plan. Also the Lincoln and Montana Quad, which served as the historical primary entrance to the school before those additions on the left, which were added in the 1950s. Additional features include the brick flagpole ring, which is in the South Quad, the WPA bronze plaque, and the brick wall, which is in the very northwestern corner, which were all part of the original development of the school. Next. So here are some examples of the different buildings. And you can see in some of these, those patios that were used with the doors so that you could easily access the outdoors from each of the classroom buildings. Also in building C, the photograph, you can see the brick flagpole ring as well. And so next. Here's some other examples. So the Lincoln and Montana Quad, which would have been the original entrance to the school, the courtyards, the WPA bronze plaque, and the Theodore Roosevelt panel. So those are also contributing features. Next. Okay, I'm on again. So John Adams Middle School. So this one has some similarities to Roosevelt. So it's perfect that Roosevelt went first, but this is a photograph of the school at the time of its erection. Next. So John Adams Middle School was found to be eligible for criteria A11 and C3, 4, 5 with period of significances for criteria A, which is associated with events or patterns of events from 1935 to 1948. And for architecture from 1935 to 1938. And so the period of significance for the campus is to 1948, but specifically for those 2 criteria of eligibility. And that is because of building C, which I'll discuss when we get to the aerial view. But essentially the timeframe includes the original period of development in post-1933 Long Beach earthquake years, when master architects Marsh, Smith, and Powell cohesively designed the campus to withstand seismic activity. This involved their innovative Santa Monica plan. So this was following Roosevelt, but very shortly thereafter, which was a precedent-setting design with functional teaching spaces, child-centered buildings, and plentiful outdoor spaces, similar to Roosevelt. And the Santa Monica plan actually went on to inspire many other plans throughout the United States, actually. Development was funded by the WPA, like many of these other schools we've seen during this period. One building, Building C, so this is why the period of significance is different for these two criteria of eligibility, was designed in 1938, but it wasn't built until 1948. When it was built to its earlier specifications. So that's why it's eligible as part of this campus development, but not necessarily for its actual construction, seeing as Marsh, Smith, and Powell didn't actually complete the building. So contributing features are those buildings and features that were constructed during the period of significance and retain their integrity. So next. This is an aerial view of the historic district. So there were a few different periods of construction. There are 9 buildings, buildings U, T, S, P, Q, and North, and South, and C. So the main core was designed by Marsh, Smith, and Powell, and then with some 1938 additions by Taylor. And the features contributing to this one are the Northeast Quad, the Southeast Quad, the Northwest Quad, and the Southwest Quad. And it's important to note for these as well that it's rather the spatial relationship between the buildings than the landscaping, which has been altered. The 16th Street Quad is also a contributing feature. Additional features include the John Adams Middle School sign, the WPA bronze plaque, and the boys sign. So these are some examples. So building C in the top left is that example that was, the entire building was planned in 1938 when Taylor and Taylor was working on expanding that historic core. The bottom, the southern half of the building was actually constructed during that, and then it was expanded in 1948 to those earlier designs, specifications. Next. So here you can see a few of the different buildings. Also, the courtyards are visible in some of these as well. So you can see that they have been altered over time to a certain extent. Next. And then here are additional features. So the boys sign, the original John Adams Middle School sign, and PWA plaque. So that's it.
Lee-Con.
Right. Hello, once again. So the last campus that ARG evaluated was Lincoln Middle School. Next slide, please. So just a brief history of this campus. It was originally constructed in the early 1920s by noted architects Allison and Allison. You can see what it originally looked like in that top photo there. The school consisted of a 2-story main building, which is now known as the 100-200 building, flanked by 2 single-story wings that projected outward toward the street. The original design of the school was in the Italian Renaissance Revival style, which was very popular in the 1920s when it was constructed. Once again, this campus sustained extensive damage in 1933, the Long Beach earthquake. It was extensively renovated in the mid-1930s by Parkinson and Parkinson, another notable architectural firm, in the PWA modern style. So the image on the bottom shows what it looks like in post-reconstruction. Several more buildings were added after World War II. They were placed kind of at various locations around the perimeter of the campus. And then the most recent additions to the campus are relatively contemporary. These include the library on the west side of the campus, which was completed about 8 years ago, and an extensive renovation of the track and field facilities in 2018. Next slide, please. So looking at this campus, this one deviated from the others in that there were no historic resources identified here. We looked at the campus as a whole in the context of a historic district. In our opinion, there is not a historic district present here. The buildings and site features comprising Lincoln Middle School date to different periods. They're designed in different styles by different architects. There's not a deliberate placement or plan associated with these buildings, and they don't really have a meaningful relationship in with one another in a way that would merit consideration as a historic district. We also did look at each building individually. We took an especially careful look at the 100-200 building. This is the oldest building on the campus and is one of the most prominent buildings on the campus, probably the one that people associated with the campus recognize the most. But in looking at all of the alterations that have been made to this building over time, there have been many alterations, we concluded that it does not retain sufficient integrity to convey any historical significance. Other buildings on the campus read as pretty typical examples of their respective eras. They're very consistent with kind of the types and styles of buildings that were being constructed in the district at this time. But nothing in our research indicated that any one of these buildings rose to a level of individual significance. And that is it for Lincoln Middle School.
Okay, so ARG and HRG have had their first meetings with the SMS Project Architects, and ARG and HRG will participate in both the CEQA analysis and also will consult as historic architects on any alterations or adaptive use of potential historic resources. And we will follow the Secretary of Interior standards for preservation in determining the next steps. As part of the CEQA process, they'll be looking at that analysis, asking the question, and also in some specific cases, and this is something I'd like to sort of talk about a little bit, is about that in a historic district, there might be a historic district with a number of contributors, but not all contributors are necessary to maintain the historic district. So there is a possibility for some selective change, alteration, removal of contributing members and still maintaining the historicness of the district. And that's something that will be analyzed as part of the CEQA process. And I think that's the end of that. Before I go away from the slideshow, which I think I already did, actually I can just go away. Do any of the committee members have any questions, particularly for Andrew or Alexandra? We'll do questions first, and then I do believe we have at least 2 public comments.
Carrie?
Joan, go
Yeah, I'm
ahead.
doing your job, Joan.
So I think you just answered one of my questions. It was, if we decide to remove something within a historic district, does that impact the qualification of it still remaining a historic district?
It would need to be analyzed. Alexandra or Andrew, would you want to respond to that thought?
Sure. Yeah, Carrie, as you mentioned, it would need to be analyzed. We look at projects holistically to determine the potential impacts. And it depends on the nature of the project and the specific buildings or features being affected. So it requires kind of careful review, and it's a holistic determination. But yes, in many cases, it is possible to remove or alter contributing elements of a historic district. And at the end of the day, if the district is still eligible as a historic district.
Because it seems to me like a lot of the schools had their blue or red hashtag borders were around most of the school. So that seems like that really ties our hands if we want to stick with this. I don't know, it seems a little bit overwhelming how much is potential and it didn't get narrowed down into a little bit. I find it kind of like, whoa, yeah. So that's more of discussion, not clarifying, sorry.
Yeah, we might wait for discussion on for that. Are there any other questions from committee members?
Yeah, I have one.
There is. Ralph had his hand up, and Margaret would also like
Okay,
to.
I guess
great.
let me use that.
Well, we know you're next, Margaret.
Okay.
Just one question, Carrie, at this point. So will ARG and HRG be discussing the master plan build outs with the architects at this time?
We've had our first meetings on that, and there's more to be done about that discussion. Mostly we focused on the SMS projects, but yes, that's our next real big phase, is to take a deeper look at the campus plans for each of the campuses and look at the relationship and impacts of the historic resources with those campus plans. And in some places, I'll jump ahead a little bit. Like at Roosevelt, we've already asked the architects to go back and take a deeper look at the campus plan based on the information we've received. And other places we think there's going to be some more analysis that's going to be required. Certainly more analysis that will be required.
Okay. Well, if you want to have a discussion about it, we can wait, but thank you for that.
Yeah.
I think Margaret was the next question.
Yeah, well, Ralph kind of touched upon my question. Carrie, when you were describing the steps, how do the current plans for the SMS project impact HR, historic resources? I mean, that's a longer discussion and evaluation, but I know we're not quite there yet. My second question, and maybe this is a preview of our discussion, how do the current plans that are being considered for SMS somehow cement us or lock us into the master plans that have been drafted without the benefit of the HRIs?
Yeah.
And so those are maybe just preview, sort of setting the laying the table for further robust discussion.
Yes, I want to say that both of those questions will be addressed and discussed as part of our next agenda item. So this agenda item is very much about the sort of acceptance and sort of review of the reports. And then our next agenda item will start taking a look at the SMS projects and next steps with that in relationship with the HR.
One quick question, Carrie. At the beginning of your PowerPoint, you made some mention of the fact that school districts typically do not identify historic resources on K through 12 campuses. Was that my understanding?
Historic districts.
Districts. Okay. I wanted to ask the consultants, Alexandra and Andrew, whether they have any insight into that issue or any further information to provide.
I can start, and then Alexandra, if you want to chime in, feel free. Like Carrie mentioned in his presentation, the only other school district that I'm familiar with that has identified historic districts is LAUSD. We haven't done a lot of, our firm hasn't done a lot of work with school districts, so I can't speak in a super comprehensive way, but there is precedent, at least locally, with LAUSD identifying potential historic districts at some of their campuses.
Yeah, and I can just riff off of that. So LAUSD has definitely utilized historic districts in the past, but we also have seen Survey LA identify various schools using the historic district approach. And they can span, in the reports we had just an example, or a couple of examples rather, of schools that Survey LA identified as eligible as historic districts. And those can geographically and thematically really span from, for example, a Japanese language school in Boyle Heights, which is eligible for its association with the Japanese American community, to Venice High School, eligible for its post-1933 Long Beach earthquake. So similarly, Los Angeles sort of context and LAUSD, but so we do see that locally and pretty commonly.
Paul, would you like to add? Paul Travis is also now with us from HRG.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Yeah, Paul Travis, I'm managing principal with HRG. I don't have a lot more to say. I think part of why you might not be able to find a lot of elementary schools that have been identified as historic districts is either because they're often highly altered over time if they have been around for a long time, or maybe that they just haven't been analyzed as a historic resource, because typically when you have a single property that's been developed for a single purpose with multiple buildings and features, the district approach would be the approach that you would typically use when looking at it as a historic district. But the fact remains that we don't outside of Los Angeles, locally, we don't have a lot of examples of that.
Thank you.
So Thomas has a question, it looks like.
Yeah, just a question, since LAUSD has been referenced and often this district uses LAUSD. When did they do their historical analysis? After the fact or at the beginning?
I believe their historic context statement, which was sort of the holistic beginning to that, was from 2013 or 2014. But Andrew or Paul, feel free to correct me if that's.
But to the second half of that question, Thomas, LAUSD has been in construction for 30 years. I mean, they're constantly updating, replacing buildings, modernizing. So it sounds like the answer would be kind of in the middle, because they're clearly projects that were done in the last, say, 20 years that before that, I think you said historical context statement, Alexandra?
Yeah.
That would have impacted potential historic districts. So, you know, they did it at a point in time, just like we are. I mean, you could look back and say, gosh, if we hadn't done that renovation in the 70s, that would have been a beautiful example of whatever, but we are where we are, so.
And I do want to say that we had a very, very good and robust conversation with the folks at LAUSD who both wrote and who are managing this process. So we learned a lot of things from them. And in part, you know, one of the things that they discussed was how they do treat districts, and somehow where they do, you know, find a need to do some alterations or removal of some of the contributors, and sometimes that they, you know, and how they've been playing with it was a very interesting thing. Julian, who's our entitlements person, might add to that part of the conversation.
Yeah, I just LAUSD did their comprehensive historic resources analysis with their last program EIR, which was undertaken sometime around 2016, I believe. So it was after they had done their new school construction bond, and with the last bond that was passed in 2016 was when they did the comprehensive analysis. Before that, they were doing each project on a piecemeal basis. So if they had a project at a school, they would hire a consultant like Paul or Andrew, go out and do the evaluation. And then in their latest programmatic EIR, did a much more comprehensive and provided guidance for how to move forward with their projects. So very similar fashion to what we're doing now.
So Joan, I think now's probably, looks like now would be the time for public comments, and we have two requests to address the committee. The first is Ruth Ann Lehrer, and she's followed by Nina Fresco. And each speaker will have 3 minutes.
Are you doing the clock on this, or is Kathy?
I can, yeah, I'll do it.
Thank you.
You need to unmute yourself, Ruth Ann.
How does that work?
Yes, there we are.
Thank you. Thank you. Welcome, everybody, and thanks for listening to my comments. So in answer to Joan's initial question about what's the meaning of these historic assessments, they're intended as baseline information for planning purposes, identifying the structures, architectural features, and spatial relationships that are worthy of preservation. Protecting and respecting these historic resources is not only good public policy, but down the line will expedite the CEQA process, as avoiding alterations, removal, or other adverse impacts to those identified historic resources by following the Secretary of Interior's standards for rehabilitation should reduce or even eliminate negative impacts. Right now, the most critical issue for project planning and design is the compatibility of new construction and alterations to the identified historic resources. Avoiding adverse impacts by considering scale, architectural style, setting, and placement of new construction adjacent to identified historic resources needs to occur right up front as part of the planning process. There are detailed guidelines in the Secretary of Interior's standards for rehabilitation that can help architects understand this conceptual framework. This step requires interaction and consultation between the historic preservation consultants and the project architects. This is an upfront process that needs to happen now as distinct from CEQA, which happens at the end of the process. You've been talking about this possible interactive process between the identified historic resources and the planning for future facilities. And I believe that it's staff's intention that this happen now, as Carrie had said to me in an email. During the next phase of design development, the project architects will work with HRG and ARG to adapt the designs to align with the Secretary of Interior standards. I know campus walkthroughs are scheduled in a few weeks, and these should be substantive discussions. As an example, I would point to Mckinley School, where the intersection between the historic resources and the proposed building program should be revisited. McKinley campus is a gem among our collection of historic buildings in our schools. It has a very ambitious building program proposed with new construction crowding the historic resources along the front facade of Santa Monica Boulevard and also along Chelsea, where the view of the historic arcades is most prominent. We hope that the initial designs and locations will be reconsidered and adjusted to protect the integrity of this historic district. I'd like to reaffirm the Conservancy's commitment to help with this process, working with the historic preservation consultants and design team. I would just mention that the board policy for historic preservation includes this statement: consulting with interested third parties, including the Santa Monica Conservancy, when potential impacts to identified historic resources are involved. So
Yeah,
thank you for that, and we look forward to working together.
Very close to exactly 3 minutes. Thank you, Ruth Ann. So then the next speaker is Nina Fresco. Hi, Nina.
Hi, everyone. Thank you.
There you go, Nina. Let's start over. Sorry.
Thank you so much for these 7 excellent reports. I have read all of them. I have no quibble with the conclusions of the reports, except to note that the district boundaries should be each entire campus, with the significant buildings and spaces identified being the only contributors. The historic siting of the resources relative to their campuses is also significant, and the boundary change would ensure an appropriately sensitive approach to compatibility of new construction in the future. One small error that has passed from study to study in the city of Santa Monica for years, that is also in these reports, is that somehow the inclusion of the Ocean Park neighborhood in the corporate limits of the city is often cited as 1908. This is incorrect. It has been part of the city since 1886. A simple download of incorporation records from the county assessor website would confirm it. Several attempts at secession did occur between 1900 and 1909 that have confused many. They all failed. And I urge you to stop using whatever source it is in the city that has that 1908 date. More germane to schools, the context narratives don't really make it clear that there was definitely de facto segregation in Santa Monica schools for many years. I mentioned this to you early on, that I had a lot of research on the old Garfield School, which was our the one school where all the people of color, that was entirely people of color in Santa Monica. And even though it no longer exists, I didn't share it because it doesn't exist. I didn't share it with you at the time because it didn't seem quite germane. But reading your reports and your background narratives, I think it's really important to include that part of the story, and I would be happy to share that research with you. There are other small details about historic architects, the influence, for example, of Norman Foote Marsh's early partner, Clarence Russell, who actually built like 5 of the early schools that fell apart in the earthquake, and his influence on Marsh and how he got to Santa Monica in the first place and all that. I think that I'd like to talk to you more about that information and see if you think that might be relevant. But thank you again for your excellent work. And I hope we can talk about those details and maybe record some of them in the reports before they're finalized and adopted. One little extra note is that I do find it troubling that discussions are already surrounding a challenge to the legitimacy of historic district designation on elementary school campuses. And the possibility of at least trying to plan on historic resources in their entirety seems dim right now. I hope that's not a sign of resistance to historic preservation overall. Sorry about my cat here. And I hope staff won't wait until the CEQA phase to take these studies into consideration.
Thank you.
Have
Madam.
some
We're
imagination.
well past 3 minutes. Thank you.
And give it a chance. That's all. Thank you.
Okay, Joan. So now is the time for committee discussion.
Let someone else go first. Anyone?
I just have a question. We're going to have a discussion about the reports. What about the next item 7? How does that relate into this?
So I think this would be a discussion about the reports, and then in item 7, obviously there's a vote on asking or on recommending that the board move forward with the next phase of design on some of the projects. So this would really be about the reports, but I think your point, Ralph, which is well taken, is the reports impact some of these projects. And so the two discussions will kind of flow together, but we want to present these as a standalone item and then go forward with the next item where we'll discuss the actual projects.
Okay.
Judith?
I was just going to say, I think, I mean, I really appreciate getting these reports and having this work done. But I think that unless, we're going to really just look at the reports and have questions about them, it would make more sense to look at the impacts on the projects going forward. Because that's really, I think, that the purpose of having this report set in terms of our planning. So I suggest we move ahead unless anybody has questions.
I just want to say I feel like when we're looking at these potential historical districts are so big on each of these campuses, it seems like it's going to really cause, it's too bad it wasn't more in specific buildings or, I feel like there's so much of space that is identified on each campus. It's going to really tie our hands on some of these future moves. And I hope that's not the case, because I think some of these schools really do need to be updated and not limited only to the area where there's bungalows or new buildings. And I just feel like this is gonna, I'm all for historic resources, and I'm not saying I'm not, but I just think there's such a huge areas in each campus that are identified that it really ties our hands a little bit. I think Margaret wanted to say something.
Yeah. Yes, thank you. Joan, you had asked earlier about the red line and the blue line on the campus plans. And maybe this is a point of clarification. I'd like to understand, it seems to me that those campus maps with the red and blue, the red defined the entire campus. My understanding, and based on the historians' reports, is that the blue dotted line or the blue line was actually a smaller area that was defining the proposed historic district. And that on the other hand, Nina Fresco is also suggesting that the entire campus be considered the district. So I think we have a tension there. The HRIs are actually delimiting the sensitive historic areas, as I understand it, but maybe that's something to clarify.
Isn't that because ARG and HRG had different legends on their maps? Isn't that correct?
That's a good question.
Didn't one of you use blue to delineate the historic district and then red to outline the campus, and the other one used red hashtags?
Carrie, do you want to bring those up to?
Yeah, I can bring those up.
Yeah, it'd be helpful to clarify that.
I was a little confused about that.
Joan, was there a particular campus that you recall that we'd like to see?
Well, I'll just say, so if you look at Will Rogers, I'm not just picking that one, but I think they use the blue.
Okay, hang on a second. I'll have it up in a moment.
Yeah, you just had it. You were there. Yeah, so they use the blue to do the historic out district, and then the red. And then I think if you look at grants, ARG used red hashtags instead of the blue.
Probably going the wrong way. I am going the wrong way to Grant.
No, I think there was some consistency.
I could be wrong.
Yeah.
Yeah, so they use the red hashtags instead of the blue. And then there's still so there's no blue on there. Before we go to the public, I would make them both consistent with the legends, just because it's confusing.
Okay.
So they're right. Am I right? The red hashtag and versus blue solid line?
No.
We were not consistent between schools because we treated all of these as somewhat individual reports.
Because the two different consultants did it differently.
Yeah, and even then, we treated them a little differently. I mean, because we were treating each school sort of specifically, because here we have blue and red that are both historic, you know.
Oh, correct.
But we can find a way to, before we go to another larger meeting, we can find a way to have that conversation.
But Carrie, if I might, just to clarify, I think that the original observation was correct. There's a delineation of the overall property, and then there's a delineation of a district boundary, and that district boundary is a subset of the overall property.
Right.
Regardless of how it was, if it was with a red line or a dashed line.
Yeah. Probably very easy to make those all consistent legends.
We could do that.
Absolutely, yeah.
Joan, I see that Margaret still has her hand up, or has her hand up again. Sorry.
I'm not sure. Yes, well, that helps. There's so much paper here, and I must say that there's a lot to absorb. But I'm looking at, I'm wondering what is actually before us at this point. What is our goal at this meeting?
So this part is just the discussion about the historic resources. If we feel like we've discussed the historic resources reports enough, and part of the reason we wanted to do this is that we ask the consultants to look at the sites without thinking about what our plans were. You know, we didn't have meetings with the architects before they finished the plan. So in the same way, I'm asking you to take a look at the historic resource reports independent of what the plans are. But then the next step is what we're going to do is where we talk about what the architects were doing, because the architects were in many ways working with the programming and the needs, educational needs, and what that plan was. And we're not thinking so much about historic resources. So now we're going to have, after this, the next thing would be to blend them two together. So this is really just about the report. So if there are not any additional questions about this.
I think Ralph has a question and then I have a question. Go ahead, Ralph.
Go.
Yeah, just a quick comment. This discussion about historic districts. I mean, for me, the reports are identifying historic fabric. There are districts that, you know, that identify historic, you know, character and places and buildings, and other organizations that don't, and churches and the like that don't create the districts or landmarks. A lot of it is because there's no real benefit to doing it. And you know, people a lot of times do it because sometimes there's tax benefits. There's other benefits to, you know, to designations. In this case, the designation would be, I don't know, more about a, you know, responsibility, if you wanted to say something like that. But the important thing is to have the information as we move forward. The information isn't going to disappear. And every time you take a project and you look at it against the information we have, what you're really doing is assessing whether or not that potential project could harm the fabric and buildings that you have in such a way that they potentially would no longer be considered historic, of character, that they could be a landmark or a district. So I hope, I'm just saying that because it can get us over the discussion about what do we do with this information in terms of do we create districts or not. That's a different discussion than I think for today, at least, or particularly in the near future, moving forward. We have this information about, the great work we have that tells us what we have. And now we have to see how that, potentially impacts, our future projects.
Yeah, and I would just like to say to piggyback on Ralph's comment, I don't think we should let the word district throw us. In other words, Ralph used the word fabric, and I think that's the value. What I learned from these reports, where they're so valuable, is that it really identifies the historic fabric and relationships, and that becomes the guidance for the next step. So let's not get too excited about the notion of district and whether it's going to be designated or listed or not. I mean, this is really a planning tool.
That's a good point, Margaret. A quick question. So when you go to the public, are you mainly focusing on these public meetings that are upcoming on these SMS middle school projects? Or are you also going to be presenting the historical research reports?
Yes, we'll be both. So at the community meetings we have planned for the end of this month and next March, the goal is to first look at the campus, what the condition is, what's not working, some of the things we've already done to improve them, to look at the historic resources so people actually can identify when it says, hey, building B is potentially a historic resource. I'd like people to actually stand there and look at building B, and see what it is. And then we will talk about both the SMS projects and our future campus plans, what are campus plans. So we're going to wrap all of that together to get input on what we're doing. And I think it's important because there are going to be challenging, needs. And as some people will say about the importance of the historic resource, other people, as we know, will make a major push for open space. And then there will be, we're an educational facility. How are we going to educate our students and the best facilities to do that? So I think that's part of the goal, was to get everybody together to sort of see all of these things and have the conversation collectively.
Because I think some of those reports take the campuses out 25 years in terms of imagining what they're going to look like, which would be very confusing because most of those imaginations are totally in opposition to this historic resources designation.
Some parts, and other parts no. Yeah.
I mean, Will Rogers looks entirely different in the visualization 25 years from now.
And maybe what we have to do is scrap that campus plan and not do that. But the first 3 phases of that campus plan are all things that potentially could be done without touching historic.
Right. Okay.
Right, but I think it's a great point, Joan, because we're talking about, and again, to your point earlier, Steve, yes, construction's been ongoing for 30 years in LAUSD, and then their historical report came in 2014. And I can't speak for LAUSD, but I hope that they would have used that as an opportunity to reset and reevaluate. And so the next conversation we're about to have shows that we haven't taken these historical reports and reset and reevaluated, because these historical reports directly impact specific projects, as well as, to your point, Joan, the larger campus plan and what the future looks like. And so, Carrie, while you said that Will Rogers has 3 upcoming projects that aren't going to impact the historical nature of the site, if those then have to be knocked down in order to properly have the campus plan be in effect and meet the historical resource guides, that's an important piece that should be considered now, not moving forward simply to spend bond money. And so I do think that there is an important call out there about utilizing these historical reports in the right way before presenting SMS bond update projects to a community and try to get buy-in.
We're going to go to that discussion next.
That's what this is, Sam.
Okay.
Well, but it's an important call out because this next conversation, those historical reports have not been included in these projects, correct?
Well, why don't we listen to those and then we can make that determination?
Excuse me?
Yes, they have, Sam.
Thank you.
Judith, did you have something?
No, I mean, I agree with what Sam has said, just in terms of our overall planning that, I mean, we never had these reports before. This is new information. And I believe that, the district has determined that this is part of the planning going forward. So whatever, but I guess what I'm just saying is let's look at the next item and see if that makes sense in terms of these reports, if we're able to move ahead, or if we have to take a step back and look at them in terms of these overall reports. So I don't know where we are.
Yeah, I think it's a good point, Judith. And to Sam's point, this is that process. So Joan, if it's okay with you, it seems like this conversation is wrapped up, and we should move on to the action item for recommendation regarding authorization for the specific projects, where we'll hear from our architects. And one of the things we're going to hear is that at one campus, we do have to throw the plan away. So I'm probably stating that in a less than eloquent way, but it is our plan going forward is absolutely guided by these historic resource reports. So I'm going to ask Carrie to lead this discussion as well.
Okay, let me get it open. And I got a few more slides today, so a few things did shift and change in this, but we've updated the thing from what we sent you. You'll see it. Okay, so the next question then is, we have our SMS projects. In October of 21, there was a recommendation by this group to proceed with these SMS projects that totaled, $87 million. And then we had some things that we needed to do. So we had discussions about recreational areas that needed to be discussed. We had a lot of fun with COVID. And we also had the direction to spend time with historic resources. So we've gone through the process of the historic resources, and the board in April gave direction to begin the design work to do the programming and schematic design up to that point, and then pause before design development. Okay, so if we were to build these projects today as they're planned, now they would cost $104 million. So that's $16 million more than we have, $16.6 million more than we have allocated in Measure SMS. And that's just from escalation of cost. Every day we wait, every day we pause, it does make the price of these go up rather substantially. And there's no real hope that that's going to change anytime soon. So already there's at least one of these projects we can't afford with that price. And further delay will take another one or two projects off this list. Here's just sort of our schedule. If we were to go ahead and get approval to move forward with these design of how we would get there. So we'd start construction of most of these in the summer of 23. Some of them would be purposefully delayed a little bit longer. We can't really do all the projects at the same time. Plus, we also have to have a little bit of time to get through the DSA and procurement process. So some of these would be delayed, but this would be if we were adjusted for where we are in February of 22 going forward. All of these things are working in a parallel path. So we're doing the historical resources report. We're still refining the campus plans, and we have some meetings coming up about refining the campus plans. We're also working and have begun our CEQA process. As I said, the Measure SMS projects have done programming, site analysis, schematic design, and are now ready to move forward into design development. All of this wants to have more community input, and hopefully the virus will go to a point that will allow us to have more in-person community input, because we find we're not getting as much whenever we just do it on Zoom. Historic consultants focused on their analysis first, while the architects focused on the educational needs and programming. And then now that they've been complete, they've had first meetings to look at these projects. We have a lot more analysis to do between the historical and with the architects to determine where we are going and how we might adapt, change, or work these through. But we have to get approval to move forward in the design by the board. Otherwise, we're frozen and we can't move forward anyway. So we really need that approval. So the direction that we're asking the board is to provide direction to proceed with these 5 projects, the Grant, Rogers, McKinley, Franklin, and John Adams projects, into the next level of design in conjunction with our historical architects. And it's also recommended that the board give direction to go back and revisit the plans, campus plans for Roosevelt, where we have some significant historical conflicts between the campus plan and the potential historical resources. And Lincoln Middle School, where, as you remember, we never really quite settled on a campus plan, but the architects have been working on this, and we feel like we're much closer, and we would have subsequent community meetings to discuss where we're going with these plans. And then we're going to turn, and I'm just going to bring the architects to talk our way through these, where they are now with the designs. So Jim Favaro, are you here to take us away with this?
Yes, I'm here. Everyone can hear me, yes?
Yes.
All right. I'll be discussing first the McKinley School SMS project. This is the existing condition site plan. On the right is Santa Monica Boulevard. Above Chelsea, to the left Arizona, and 23rd Court along the bottom. The buildings shown in light orange are what has been designated the historic district of this campus. They are the original buildings. We refer to them as South Wing and North Wing around the historic courtyard. South Wing facing Santa Monica Boulevard. The striped buildings are modular buildings, the pre-school building at the corner of Chelsea and Santa Monica, and the cafeteria along 23rd Court. The purple buildings, those along 23rd Court, are 9 portable classrooms, of which all of them will be replaced in the new classroom building, which will situate on the parking lot that was installed sometime, obviously, after the original complex was built in the 20s and the 30s, probably in the 70s, when it became clear that Santa Monica Boulevard was too busy for the front office, and when parents began to drive their children to school. When that was installed, the front office moved to the side that's facing Chelsea Avenue, where the loggia is currently facing onto the parking lot. So to get to the front office, you negotiate 2 aisles of parking, plus I think 3 chain link or wrought iron fences to get to the actual entrance to the school. Next one, please. So the Phase 1 project, or SMS project, contains 8 classrooms, which are separated from the main building, what I refer to as the main building, by a courtyard shown with the green trees between, and it connects to the main building in 2 spots, like pincers that reach out in order to correct some exiting issues and circulation challenges of the existing north and south wings of the building. It's important to point out that the parking will migrate to the corner of Arizona and Chelsea, in a currently underutilized area of the playground. Some of that area will be recovered by that area of the playground that we can expand underneath the footprint of the portables, which are removed along 23rd Court. The new front of office moves closer to Chelsea. It's essentially moving straight forward with a setback along Chelsea to accommodate a pickup and drop off lane that no longer has conflicts with parking. You can go to the next slide. So this is a drawing that's currently in the drawing set and shows the ground floor of the new building. So what you see is the front office on the right, the new entrance. We worked pretty closely with the principal on the layout of that. Next to that are 4 classrooms, which are sized according to the ed specs, which are embedded in the Education Master Plan, which the Board of Education approved in 2019. They are approximately 1,200 square feet. Above them, you'll see outdoor classrooms that line along that frontage there. And in front of that is a screen wall and a loggia for staging of children beginning and end of the days for pickup and drop off. You can go to the next slide, Carrie. This is now the second floor of the building with 4 upper elementary classrooms, again, sized according to the education specifications at about 1,300 to 1,400 square feet, also with outdoor classroom space on the Chelsea side of the building, all of course hidden from view from the street. And then you see at either end of that courtyard where the green trees are, the bridges that connect to the second floor of the main building. On the north wing and on the south wing, that south connection is replacing the chain link fence caged stairs, which are currently serving for the required exit from the south wing of the building. Next, if you will, Carrie. So what's shown here is a view as if you're hovering above the modular building that's at the corner of Chelsea and Santa Monica Boulevard. The south wing that faces Santa Monica Boulevard is on the far left. All of the buildings on the left side are existing buildings. The new building is the one in the center of the image. Its peak maintains the height of the main building, both north and south wings. You see the new front office, the lower corner there facing us, and along it is the loggia, and along it is the pickup and drop off lane along Chelsea. And that is to get all of the pickup and drop off operations off of neighborhood streets and without conflict with staff and parent and volunteer parking. We are stepping down the massing in the building in order to be more friendly with the neighbors across the street. If you go to the next one, Carrie. So this is a view more or less from the corner of Chelsea and Santa Monica Boulevard. Well, now there's nothing that stands in the way between you and the front office. You walk off the street, cross that lane into the front office, and from there can get access to the rest of the school. So you see some of the expression of the building. It may have been originally designed as Italianate. I think most Santa Monicans would probably recognize the main building as mission style. Its characteristics are the red tile roof, the arches, and some flourishes around the original main entrance. So we're maintaining all of that in terms of the character of this building. You go to the next, Carrie. And crucially, on the side that's facing the main building, there's the loggia on the right, which is currently shrouded in 3 layers of chain link fences. Beyond is the the area where the staged stair comes down off the second floor of the south wing. So we are holding back the massing of the building in order for there to be a clear distinction, easily recognizable difference in the area of the buildings. Although we are shaping this side of the building in order to affirmatively create a garden courtyard off of which will face a variety of functions, not the least of which are the lower elementary classrooms on the left and beyond the front office and administrative suite of the school. If you go to the next slide, Carrie. This now we pivoted and we're looking north towards Arizona. You see on the right, the entrance into the courtyard from the main office. To the left is the loggia. To the left of that loggia is where the existing main office is. And again, we're holding the building back from the existing building in order to distinguish the 2 areas of the building. If you go to the next. And this is now from the playground looking back to the new building. The north wing is to the right. In front of that is some 3rd grade classroom modulars, which ultimately will come down and may in fact come down in this phase. We're not exactly sure yet. And then you see the bronze filigree that is forming the actual connection to the second floor corridor of that building, again, to hold the new building back in order for easily recognizable expression of the two areas of the building. Here you see some of the barrel vaults, for example, that we're using to shape the loggias on the side facing the existing building, again, to recall some of the original vocabulary of the historic building. And finally, the next one, Carrie. And this is a view now looking from the north-south towards Santa Monica Boulevard. There you see the pickup and drop-off lane in the foreground, the screen wall that is along the side of the loggia, covered loggia, that is the staging area for children beginning and the end of the day. Beyond that screen wall, it's the ground floor outdoor classrooms for lower elementary. I think that concludes, Carrie.
Yes. Franklin, I didn't see if I saw Jeff. Is it Abby who's going to do it?
We're both on, Carrie.
Okay. Great.
Hello, everyone. I'm Abby Calisawyer with DSK Architects, the project manager for this project. Jeff Fuller is also on the line as well, the principal with DSK Architects. So right now we're looking at the Franklin existing site plan. So the current Franklin campus consists of 8 buildings and 9 portable buildings on a 5.6 acre site. The site is located between Montana and Idaho Avenue, nestled between 23rd and 24th Place, with a satellite campus on the corner of Montana Avenue and 25th Street. You can go to the next one, Karen. The first SMS project will include a new makerspace building and playfield and yard improvements. The new makerspace building includes 2 maker studios with a shared resource center with collaboration spaces and specialty areas to support them. The building will have large open spaces with high ceilings to allow for more project opportunities and a folding partition wall between the maker studios, which can allow for the option of one large 2,400 plus square foot space. The building is just over 4,100 square feet, which is in line with the programming goals provided by the district education specifications that Jim Favreau mentioned earlier. The facility also offers over 3,300 square feet of outdoor instructional space divided between a large maker yard, a smaller outdoor collaboration patio, and a pinup presentation space. The shape of the building allows it to offer a greater number of and variety of outdoor instructional spaces than required and anticipated by the education specifications. You can go to the next one, Carrie. So this is the east side of the Maker Lab facing the playground and yard. So that's showing the collaboration patio on that side. You can go to the next one, Carrie. And this is showing a view of the maker yard, and the resource center there is the building off to the right. And then one of the maker studios is more in the background. You can also see off to the left, a little presentation stage in the maker yard. You can go to the next one, Carrie. So this is just a nighttime rendering of another view that we just saw earlier of the collaboration patio. Go to the next one, Carrie. And then this is just another view of the maker yard. You can see the presentation stage in the foreground and the height difference of the maker studio versus the resource center. You can go to the next one, Carrie. So another part of the project makes improvements to the track around the playfield along Idaho Avenue while maintaining space for a U10 soccer field and incorporating a fire apparatus lane. The playground work will relocate the Foursquare, hopscotch, basketball court, and basketball courts to maintain consistent play options for the students and the community. Thank you.
I want to go back to this slide just to say that the makerspace goes in here with where these 4 bungalows are. And then the field work is all, through here, including moving basketball courts here to where the lane is. So
correct. Thanks, Gary.
Okay. Will Rogers. Jim.
Yes, this is the existing site plan with 16th Street along the top and 14th Street along the bottom. in orange is the original mid-century complex. And the red circles are 6 portable classrooms. They're intended to be replaced in the SMS project, which will sit partially on the side of the existing playfield on the upper left. Most of the existing parking resides on the upper right. You can go to the next. A 7-classroom, 1-story building will situate partially on the existing playfield. I'll explain the siting in a minute. It has to do with our neighbors to the north. We will, in the process, move the new playfield to a more central location in campus so that it is away from our neighbors to the north. And in the process, we'll remove the 6 portable classrooms that I referred to earlier. You can go to the next. I wanted to indicate what may be a phase 2 later, not currently funded, in order that we make sure that what we do now does not create obstacles for what we might want to do later. One of the issues with our relationship to the neighbors to the north are visual and acoustic challenges going in both directions, I should say. And so we're using the correct amount of parking that will serve this school in the future, reorienting it, placing it along that north boundary so that it operates as a buffer between the school and the neighbors in both directions. We will then, in the process, be able to take all pickup and drop-off operations off of neighborhood streets. They'll be able to use that access along the north boundary any number of ways. They have lots of flexibility. They can come in off 16th or 14th or a combination, any number of ways to do that. Phase 2 itself, which is kind of irrelevant, but it is hopefully the future, would replace 10 more classes, removing the modulars and the buildings at the end of each of the bar buildings of the original complex. We can go to the next, Carrie. This is a floor plan of the 1-story early education building. It will have 4 kindergarten classrooms on the left, the bigger classrooms, and on the right, 3 smaller classrooms are TK classrooms, each with its own designated play yard, sequester from the larger play yard. The new field lies to the bottom of this diagram. Go to the next, Carrie. This is a view now looking northeast. 16th Street is running across, Jams is across the street. You see the 1-story classroom building and the new field on the right. You can go to the next. Here now we're looking northwest for 16th Street to the right. The new 1-story classroom building, the new field on the left. You can go to the next. In terms of, I have a much more elaborate presentation that we have given to the school itself about the look of the building. We've given quite a bit of thought to it. It is a kindergarten, early education building, so we wanted it to be expressed almost as a kind of garden wall, if you will, that complements the existing historic complex of the school. We're adopting kind of beige cream color brick veneer that is a little bit more substantial than the original building, but also harmonious with the original building in terms of its coloration. So we're looking, 16th Street is on the right in this view, the new field in the foreground. You can go to the next, Carrie. Now we're looking up towards 16th Street on the right. The existing classroom buildings at the end of each of the bar buildings is on the left, and you're looking through the kindergarten classroom with the turquoise opening there to their play yard beyond. I think that concludes.
And
I'll
Grant is
continue
yours
with
also.
Grant. Okay. 3 pretty modest projects, which are the library renovation, restoration and rehabilitation of the central garden, and modest renovation of the building along Pearl Street to become the early education classroom. So I'll just start with the library renovation, Carrie. Which situates between the NPR and the auditorium. You can go to the next. It was built in 2 different phases as we understood from our historic resources consultant. So this is the existing condition. In blue, next to the alley, is the existing library. And around that, the L shape that forms the U shape of the total complex are a variety of rooms which are currently underutilized and which can the ones that are still functioning can be easily moved. That's being enabled by the third project that I'll show you. To the right is the historic garden. You can go to the next. So what the project consists of is taking over those spaces, a tiny little addition down there to kind of clean up that corner of the building next to the auditorium walkway there. And we will maintain the back of house operations as they currently are: textbooks, ABIT, and the workroom in the upper left. You can go to the right. In so doing, we'll create a U-shaped library. Sorry about that. And we will open it up in all directions to transform those pretty much unused paved courtyards, which lie to the either side of the library complex. We will even transform an unused area that sits between the building and the alley to the left. We are instituting vertically retracting glass doors that will allow students to easy access, so that all of those areas in green are essentially considered outdoor classroom space associated with the library. You can go to the next. Is a view standing in one courtyard, the two wings of the U on left and right. We're looking straight through the base of the U towards the NPR with the other outdoor space beyond. Very simple drawings now. We're again in schematic design on the next slide, Carrie. Well, this is now the plan that's in the schematic design set. So begin in the lower right, there will be a early childhood story time that is visible from staff, circulation desk, but also acoustically separated for story time to be able to take concurrently with other activities in the library. Above that, reader seats and tables with a study counter there above that. Collections reside in the upper right corner. Circulation desk in the center of the U next to other additional tables and reader seats. On the left is a makerspace with associated storage. Opens out to its outdoor classroom. Above that is a project room that can be used for any number of functions, including projects associated with makerspace, as well as tutoring and mentoring and whatnot. And above that is the back of house operations that were not a part of this project. These are the simple views that we've rendered to date, just to give everyone an idea of the scale. You can go to the next one, Carrie. Haven't really landed anywhere close to materials and finishes. They're just laid in this to give us an understanding of the volume of the space. This is the early education story time room, which you probably can't see. That's all glass that's separating it from the other parts of the library. It has its own entrances in and out. We'll articulate some kind of magical, fantastical ceiling, hopefully, for the children there. If you go to the next slide. We are now standing with our back to the central garden, and we're looking straight through the legs of the U. There's the one outdoor classroom space between the two legs of the U, through to the maker space, and finally to the outdoor classroom that lies along the alley. Story time is to the left. The study counter and the collections are to the right. You see the circulation desk beyond on the right. You can go to the next. I guess, Carrie, before you do that, I just wanted to indicate that we are beginning to think about how the vocabulary of this interior will harmonize with the Art Deco vocabulary, the architecture, the historic core. You'll often see ribbons and fluting and those kinds of things blown up to different scales. So for example, the ceiling there is a kind of riff on the flutes that you find at the corners of the building, prominent at the main entrance of the building. And finally, the next is a view of that maker space with the outdoor classroom space that's situated along the alley side of the building. I believe that concludes. Oh, sorry.
Two more
There's
bits.
two other projects. Yeah. This is a very beautiful little project, very modest in ambitions, but important actually for the historic core of the campus. If you can go to the next one, we're just rehabilitating and restoring the central garden itself. So we are bringing back to life all of the trees that are currently there, some of which are really quite beautiful and unusual and do need help in order to survive, maintaining the central lawn, and then doing some work at the perimeter, the north and south. So to the right, we're instituting some kind of walkable surface with tables and chairs for students to be able to actually occupy that area where those beautiful trees are. And on the left, outdoor classroom space for, I think it's first grade classrooms, which will some kind of landscaping to demarcate their outdoor classrooms there. And finally, the third project is to relocate early education to the Pearl Street side of the campus, transforming those classrooms which are currently underutilized into 3 TK classrooms, maintaining the 4 kindergarten classrooms, and commandeering a little bit of that front lawn along Pearl Street for their outdoor classroom space. You can go to the next one, Carrie. So these are the 3 new classrooms that we're installing, code required restrooms and workrooms, sinks and whatnot between the 3 TK classrooms, and opening those classrooms out towards Pearl Street. Obviously, there will be a fence and a hedge between that play yard and Pearl Street. I think we have an indication of what that will look and feel like in the next slide.
And just to say, this
In
building
the classrooms.
this building is not considered a historic resource.
Right. This was outside of that, of the boundary that HRG drew. I think that concludes.
Okay. And Richard Berliner.
Principal.
There he is.
There I am. Hi, I'm Richard Berliner, Principal of Berliner Architects. We are only working on one of the projects that we identified in the assessment, and that's the renovation of the library on the John Adams Middle School campus. It's primarily an interior renovation of the existing library footprint, but it's a pretty extensive renovation, really taking advantage of the space and also incorporating an existing courtyard, which is identified number 5 in the yellow. The goal is to really tie the interior spaces with an outdoor space. The courtyard there is a recessed courtyard. We're bringing the level of the courtyard up to match the level of the main library space, but reimagining the interior to connect the inside and the outside and create flexibility for different uses, introducing some potential maker spaces both in the small courtyard outside and the adjacent spaces, and then introducing huddle spaces, which are in the pink on the bottom, and introducing a new conference room, number 7 at the top, which has direct access to the small courtyard in the middle. And we can go to the next slide, Carrie. This is a view looking from the courtyard. We're raising the level of the courtyard up, introducing a large door into the maker space in the library, and then on the right are new doors into the conference room. This building is part of the historic district that was identified for JAMS. So we had a preliminary conversation with the historic consultant about how to handle openings in a consistent fashion with the existing architecture. So that'll be an ongoing discussion as we develop the project. But getting that inside-out connection, taking advantage of this outdoor space, and also we're tying this side of the library to a future new entry to the jammed campus, what we're calling the community entry, that creates a new access across the south side of the library. And we go to the next slide. So this is a closer view looking into the courtyard, shade structures above, the connection to the indoors. So it's pretty intimate space, but I think it'll get a lot of views from all the adjacent indoor library learning spaces. And we go to the next view. And then this is looking at walking in the front door of the library, the connection to the outside, and the connection to these flexible spaces that tie throughout the library. And I think that's it. Oh, there's one more view on the south end of the library. We went back and forth with the principal of the school whether there will be a makerspace. This is showing it furnished as a makerspace. I think they're identifying other places on the campus as we develop it more. The furniture and fittings will be more specifically identified. I think that's it.
Yeah. So, and as we said before, Lincoln and Roosevelt need more study, further study. So I'm going to go back to a previous slide, and then we can go into more specifics. So the request is, we have taken a look at the grant, the Rogers, McKinley, and Franklin projects, and I can point those out exactly how they are not anticipated to be impacting the historic resource. And I could call on Andrew and Paul and Alexandra to help just talk a little bit about that. And then we do know that at Grant and at John Adams, the libraries are something that will have to be carefully considered. Once again, we're asking for recommendation from you to move forward with design, because we don't have the ability to have that conversation about what happens next, or even where the campus plans go with the historic, unless we let the architects move forward with the next phase. Otherwise, we are frozen and cannot move forward at all. And with every day, we're going to miss, if we don't move forward soon, we will miss summer of 23 for construction. And we will be, the bill, the cost is going to go up, and we'll be removing projects. So for education to get kids into these spaces, it's important for us to get going, for them to have a time to collaborate with the historic consultants. It's time for us to get going. So we ask that you approve moving this forward. Are there any questions? And then I know we have some public comment.
Well, Carrie, before we get too far, it's 6/20/24. Some of us have other meetings we should be at or need to get to.
Yes.
So we should do what we're going to do tonight. Maybe we should just defer, have another meeting next Monday to finish the discussion. I don't see how we can have a discussion. People want to have comments and all this, in the next 5 minutes or even the next 20 minutes. That's fair to the projects and the process. Because the meeting at the board, it's on the agenda a week from Thursday.
For the 17th.
Right.
I support Ralph Mitcher's request because I think we're dealing with a sort of complex set of issues here. I don't think any of us wants to get in the way of important projects moving forward. But on the other hand, we have a whole new set of considerations now with the historic reports, and there really needs to be an accelerated effort to bring that analysis and that lens, that now we have a fresh lens looking at not just the SMS projects, but the overall projects. And the SMS projects are certainly designed to, in some cases, I think, to move the campus plan forward to the overall master plan, but those might be impacted by what we've learned from the historic project. So I think there are many issues to unravel here, and I'm not prepared to vote to move this forward as is. I would only do it with conditions that we could tease out after a robust discussion among the committee members.
I agree. I think this is we still have a lot of discussion tonight. I would like to propose that we have the members of the public who have been waiting patiently, that we allow them to speak now so that we could have that on our minds and think about it before we meet. Again, that's my opinion.
You're the chair. It's your decision. But I think that is appropriate, Joan, to your point. I think now would be still a time for clarifying questions from committee members, and then you would take the you could take the public comments, and then prior to a motion on this item, you could continue the item to a separate meeting, which means we won't go through a presentation again. There won't be public speakers again. You'll just pick up your discussion and hopefully get a motion, pick up your discussion from there.
I think that's important also since it's Valentine's Day.
I don't think next Monday would be our usable day. At least my wife would not agree if I said yes to that. So we'll have to find another
Judith,
day.
it looks like Judith has something to say. Or was it that, Judith?
No, I wasn't thinking about that, but that's a
I
good
wasn't
point.
either.
But no, I was just going to say, just in terms of for the next meeting, if it's possible for each of the plans to be more clear, some of them more clear about the historic district bounds. Some of them aren't. If we could at least have a slide that would show that in terms of the projects we're considering, that would be helpful.
Like a supplemental graphic that shows the site plan, shows the area that is on the historic resources report, and then shows the project.
I do want to make.
And I would respectfully request that there be a fourth slide, which is where show us how far you've gotten on the master plan. So we have that context and can maybe start flagging some of the areas in which the master plan may have to be revised. So that I think if we can kind of weave that information together, it will really give us something to look at and consider.
Okay, thank you, Michael and
Only
Barbara.
way, real quick, the issue, I do want to make sure that we meet before this goes to the board and make it some sort of recommendation. So if we're not meeting on Monday and then there's other conflicts, I just want to make sure.
Well, I think it would make sense to delay it from going to the board, Joan. One other thing I would like to request is if we can get some financial breakdowns. I know that what came out to us in email did not reflect the $104 million jump. And so understanding, the current financial tags around some of these projects, as well as what we're estimating, with a summer of 23 construction, at least 20% additional charges, understanding that as well as understanding current expenses. So what we've already spent to date out of the money that was previously allocated, and then there may be some value in understanding what it would cost to do this planning, both architectural, historical, that, those pieces that need to come together to then be able to vote on the project specifically, because there is a middle ground of being able to allocate some funds to do this work while further research is done as part of the master planning, as part of the historical and architectural weaving that was discussed, without having to move forward completely with the projects themselves.
Right, and actually, I think, Sam, that's what we're asking for, is that next phase of planning, not authorization to go forward with the full project, but to move forward with the next phase. I say phase of planning, the next phase of design. Yeah, I think that's the target we were aiming at, to not slow this down, but know that we've still got work ahead of us.
Right. So if there's some financial pieces around that, Steve, I think it would be helpful to tie up that conversation as well.
Sure.
What is the next phase? Are you moving to DD or are you still in schematic design?
Next
To
phase
design development and construction, drawings.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure we understand what we're
Yeah.
agreeing to do next.
Yeah.
I
So
mean,
we did
I'm-
all the programming and the schematic design, and now we're ready on these projects, asking to move forward with design development.
Okay.
I'm,
Yeah, then
I'm willing
I
to
agree.
meet on the 14th. I know Carrie's wife wouldn't like it, but as long as we don't have the meeting go this late, like we have a plan to make sure we focus on just getting to the meeting. So we're done by 5:30 or.
I don't, Joan, respectfully, I don't think that scheduling a meeting on Valentine's Day makes a whole lot of sense.
Okay.
So again, I think there's value. I understand the urgency from some of the people sitting here, certainly respect that and understand that. But I also think there's time considerations and a lot of new information, updated information that is now being presented, that we've asked for, that, you know, there's value in delaying things, not delaying them by months, but getting further information and being able to have those conversations in depth.
Oh, I'm not saying that. I'm just saying, would we really discuss this for longer than an hour after
Could
we've
we
already
have-
had the presentation?
Could we have the overlays ahead of time and then we could come with questions ready? Like that showed the historic area versus the areas of new work, like those kind of diagrams. Could we have them ahead and then?
Jim, Richard, Abby, Jeff, you guys, I think I had a question for you all before, which was, do you have enough information to kind of create those overlays that we're asked for? And then the second question is, how long do you think it would take to get those turned around? Whichever one of you wants to answer.
I know for our project, I mean, it's probably the most modest project of all of these as far as the impact of it. It'd be relatively easy to do the overlay.
That's a good point. Jim, yours is probably the hardest.
I can get it to you tomorrow.
All right. Jeff, I'm assuming you guys are in the same boat.
Yeah, ours is similar to Jam's. I mean, it's the Franklin work is not near that. So I don't think that's very time consuming.
Okay, so then if we can get it from our architects, and I'm not going to hold you to tomorrow, Jim, but in the next couple days, and then we'll review it with staff and then get it turned around and sent out to the committee members.
Steve, I just want to make sure that we're all consistent, kind of similar. The comment was made before with the two different historic consultants. Make sure the architects, again, our drawings are somewhat different, but if we're using similar nomenclature, I think it's best.
Yeah,
That's true. So maybe the first step is that the drawings are made similar, and then we use those similar drawings too.
So Barbara, can you and Michael work with all of the architects to similarize them?
Yes,
Pretty
we
sure
can.
that's a word.
It would be great to hear. I think there's some members of the public here as well. And maybe
Yes,
we could
we're
also
still on-
identify some
Margaret, we're still
potential
on-
dates. Mm,
Right, we're still on clarifying questions from the committee, and then Joan will go to public comments.
Great, great.
I had one more question.
Sorry, Alexis.
I just was wondering if when we meet again, if each of the architects could probably just very briefly, but have a couple bullet points to share in terms of how these new buildings are integrated with what's existing in terms of what elements that they're. I heard a little bit with Mckinley probably was the best example of kind of explaining some of that, but we look at so many of these and there's so many parts and pieces, and then we get like very close-up views of the building. And so as we're developing it further, would just be like just a couple
Bring some
bullet points
context
on
to it.
that.
Okay.
Also, is it possible that maybe we could, I still have to wait for public comment, but some of these projects that are just renovations, interior renovations that don't actually involve changing a footprint, or maybe those could be things we can accept, like they need to happen and they don't really conflict with any campus look. We maybe at some point just decide we're going to accept those projects.
Well, the board will actually make the decision, but you can.
No, but I mean,
certainly-
as the
you
FDAC
can make
say
a
that
recommendation.
that's not something that we need to go into in-depth discussion about, that we're more concerned about these new buildings and
Sure.
things that are going to change the look of the campus.
Yeah, kind of take those off the table first. Say, look, we're
That's
all
what I'm
okay.
just trying to make it simpler, because to me, I think we absolutely need some of those renovations, and they're really important to the schools, and I don't think they really are impacted, they don't impact the historical look of the campus, right?
I think we can probably address those separately. I'm going to probably rely on you to figure out where that makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, the challenge is the two modernization projects that significantly matter, which is the Grant and John Adams libraries, are the only ones that are actually touching historical buildings. And while the majority of that is an interior, there are one or two openings that are something that would be a concern. I mean, the historic resources folks say that they're not at all concerned about the interiors, but the openings is something that's why we need the go ahead to work with the architects and the consultants to work out how to do those or whether to do those and what that is. That doesn't happen without it. The other three projects are clearly not impacting historic resources.
So I think it just might be the reverse of what Joan said, but
I know you disagree, Margaret, but that's coming from our historian, which we will have him say that at the next meeting.
So we're getting super close to a discussion, but I think there was another question from Judith.
My question was just to follow up on what Margaret had asked, and it's been a while. I haven't really focused on this in a long time. In terms of if there's anything that you can send a schematic of any of the longer term plans, so we could incorporate that into looking at these projects. So I don't know if there's something for each of the schools. It's been a long time, since
we have the work that we did last year. It's all available on the website. Like I said, we will need to come back and revisit a lot of that.
Yeah.
And that's going to be something we're planning to do.
Okay. Well, I mean, perhaps you can just send us the link. That would be helpful. We can look at that.
Sure.
I think we should go to public comment.
Okay, so you have one public comment, and it is Nina Fresco. And Nina, you'll have 3 minutes. But if your cat appears, you get an extra minute.
He went inside, sorry. The facilities team is asking for a thumbs up to proceed with near-term building projects that are elements of longer-term campus development plans. 7 excellent historic studies have recently been published that indicate there are 5 historic districts and 1 historic structure eligible for designation across 6 of the campuses. While some of the immediate projects may not put the historic districts at risk, 5 of the overall plans will likely have significant negative impacts on identified historic resources. They are Grant, Jams, McKinley, Roosevelt, and Will Rogers. I do not see a problem moving ahead with the library renovations at Grant and Jams, so long as the designs are revised to be consistent with the Secretary of the Interior standards. Happily, Roosevelt has already been sent back for redesign due to obvious significant impacts on historic resources. Plans for McKinley and Rogers will also require significant rethinking. The proposed new building at McKinley blocks views to the historic building so completely that it will have a clear negative impact on them. Furthermore, that new building is the first of several new buildings that will ultimately completely surround historic structures, obscuring them and stripping them of their ability to convey their significance. Both the current and future phases for McKinley need to be reassessed in light of the new reports on historic resources. Will Rogers is the other campus that raises a red flag. The currently proposed kindergarten building is far from the historic resources recently identified on the site. But in the long-term plan, the entire campus is demolished and replaced with new construction. Locking down this first building in a plan that will need to be completely rethought could make it harder to come up with a workable, feasible new way to achieve educational goals and also retain important historic resources. As the team returns to the drawing boards, I hope they will consider the possibility of 3-story buildings for these campuses and implementation of transportation demand management programs to reduce parking needs. Both of these ideas, new to the school district, could allow for much. Can somebody stop talking over me? Both of these ideas are new to the school district, and they could allow for much greater design flexibility to help the team achieve historic preservation open space, and most importantly, educational goals for Santa Monica schools. So please hold back on the plans for Mckinley and Will Rogers and move forward on the others, but with careful consideration of HRI findings by applying the Secretary of the Interior standards. And have some imagination. Give this a chance. People do it all over the world and results are fantastic. And you'll be really proud of these campuses when they're new and modern and contain updated and rehabilitated historic resources. Thank you.
Good timing, Nina. Okay, Joan. So, I mean, now the committee could either start the discussion, you could have a motion, you could have a motion to continue the item to a different date, which we don't know yet, but that's really your call.
I think given the requests that have been made for information, I think we do need to continue the item for the discussion at another time. I do want to be cognizant of trying not to stall this process too much and try to get it to the board. I don't know what options there are for another meeting. Seems like people don't want to meet on Valentine's Day.
Would people be available to meet on the 15th?
That is my birthday, which I think is more important than Valentine's Day, but I can meet early on the 15th.
Joan, it looks like I saw Margaret has a hand up and then Judith also has something to say.
Okay, go.
But Margaret, you're muted. Margaret,
you're muted.
I simply want to move to continue this meeting to a future date within the next week or so.
That's what we're trying to find out. We're trying to find a date.
She's making a motion.
Oh, got it.
So that's my motion. And
I'll second it. So Joan, we could do the 10th, which is Thursday.
We could be ready.
That's better than the 15th, than the 16th, right?
We can't notice a meeting on the 10th.
Oh, you need 72 hours?
We could continue this meeting.
Yeah, we're just going to continue the meeting.
I don't know what the notice requirements are on that, but if we can do it on the 10th, we will.
I'm fine with the 10th.
What time are you looking at on the 10th?
4:30 or 5? What? I know.
Julie, is it what time does it work?
No, I mean, 4:30, I was just going to suggest on Monday, on Valentine's Day, if we could meet earlier in the day. I don't know if that works for everyone. I could meet on the 10th, I could have 4:30.
Julie, what about you? It looked like that might.
No, I have a meeting at 5, so I'd be there for half hour.
So if we did Valentine's Day at 3?
I think I can do that.
Yeah.
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 Is that okay with you, Carrie?
Well, yeah, I mean, Carrie, how's your schedule?
You're working it.
Yeah, I can do it.
We're working one way or another, although Carrie may have a conflict. But I think we should also check with Amy and Sam. I think Amy might have an issue because of teaching.
Yeah, I'm still teaching until, sorry, I'm still teaching till 3:30, so.
Okay, 3:30.
3:30.
Yeah, I'm not available that early in the day, but.
Yeah, that's what I was concerned with is if people are working, it might be tough.
Well,
we could do the 16th.
I could meet on the, can people meet on the 15th? I could meet on the 15th. Oh, no, Joan's birthday, sorry.
You have to bring her a birthday.
All I know is my daughters are doing something and I've been told not to do anything, so.
I forgot that.
I mean, in
But
theory,
I don't, it won't be until like 6, so. They all
4
work.
o'clock. How about 4 o'clock on the 15th?
I could do that. Is that still too early, Sam?
Sam or Thomas, is that too early?
On the 16th,
The 15th, 4 o'clock on either the 14th or the 15th.
yeah, I could do 4 o'clock on the 15th. I can move an appointment around.
That's fine.
Okay, and I saw a thumbs up from Amy. I'm assuming it was to that. Alexis, how about you?
Yes, the 14th, I think I'm not going to be able to make happen, but the 15th we can do.
Okay. Well, we missed Julie.
I have something on my calendar, a meeting at 4. I thought it was a 6 p.m. meeting, so I'm not positive, but right now it's blocked out 4 to 6. If there's a majority though, we could go on and on. So I can also give comments and thoughts to someone.
Okay.
If we have a quorum.
Okay. Who have I missed?
Tom?
Thomas said he could do
Yeah,
it.
I'm fine.
Oh, good.
Sam said he could move something and do it.
Okay. Let's call it and
Margaret's got a thumbs up.
let's give ourselves a break from tonight.
Well, okay, hold on. Do you not want to do the rest of this meeting? You want to just, I thought you were just continuing this item and then the meeting. You want to continue everything?
I think people, I don't know, I have another
Okay.
meeting starts at 7.
I have another meeting.
So
Yeah, I think we've been sitting in these chairs a long time. I need to walk around before my 7 o'clock meeting.
okay, so Margaret, am I correct that your motion was to continue both this item and the meeting from this point?
Yes,
And then who's-
that is my motion.
Continue the meeting.
To continue the meeting at this point in the agenda, unless there's some critical need to go to item 8. Yeah, I'm saying yes, let's continue the meeting. And that would be part of my motion to continue it to Tuesday, February 15th at 4 p.m.
I second that. All those in favor? Opposed? Abstentions? All right. I apologize to your staff, Steve, that have been sitting so patiently through this long meeting to make their presentation.
They enjoy this stuff. Don't worry about it.
They love it. Yeah, I know they love it. They're just
All right, I gotta go.
All right, bye. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.